Welcome back, everyone. My name is Reed Blakemore, Director of Research and Programs at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. We're here once more at the Global Decarbonization Accelerator Pavilion doing a live from COP with the stakeholders from civil society, the NGO community, policy, and industry to think through what is the issue set that's driving the COP agenda this year and how we need to carry that forward to build a more sustainable and secure net zero future. I'm joined now by Rohitesh Dhawan, CEO of ICMM. Ro, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Reed.
I think it's a good way to start if you explain, what ICMM is, what you're doing, and, reflect a little bit on what is increasing attention within the COP process, positively so, to issues around mining and mineral supply chains.
So, Reed, ICMM represents the commitment of some of the world's largest mining companies to operating sustainably and responsibly. And people might think that those two shouldn't go together because you might have an image of mining that's the antithesis of sustainability and responsibility. And I'll be the first to admit that mining hasn't always been done to the standards we would expect. But through ICMM, we set the standards for responsible mining that the 24 companies that belong to our organization have as a condition of their membership. It's non-negotiable that they apply certain standards relating to carbon emissions and water and human rights and the circular economy and health and safety and all the issues that people rightly are concerned about whether we can mine sustainably and responsibly. Between us, we cover about a third of the global mining industry across 650 sites in over 50 countries. But Reed, globally, there are 25,000 mining companies operating 30,000 mine sites. So our real vision is that the leadership that we're able to demonstrate collectively then becomes the basis on which mining happens wherever it does. And why that's important is because in the future, we're going to need a lot more mining. And the simple reason for that is that all the technologies essential for decarbonization, like electric vehicles, wind turbines, they're all really metals intensive. So for example, a wind turbine takes up to 9 times as much metal input as a gas-fired power plant. And in your car, if you drive an electric car, that takes 4 times as much copper as a petrol or diesel car. So when you multiply that across all the decarbonization technologies globally, you can see how the demand for metals and minerals will go up. And so our commitment, certainly as ICMM, is to say that although the minerals we produce are critical, we're going to produce them as if they were not. And really what we're saying here is that we're going to mine with principles, that we're not just going to mine at any cost, and that we must take care of people and the planet in pursuit of these critical minerals.
It's so important, I think, for institutions such as yours, right, to be here and be a part of this process. Because as I mentioned, I think, we're just now beginning to see issues around mineral supply chains unfold and be taken very, very seriously within the COP process, because you're right, we need these resources if we want to meet these net zero goals. When you look at how the mineral supply chain piece of the COP agenda is unfolding, what would be your stock take, to use a relatively loaded word this COP time, of the state of minerals discussions in the COP process, and how can we improve that better, either on the sustainability or on the capacity building side?
This is the first time that mining has really been on the COP agenda. I've been attending COPs for at least the last decade, and never before has mining been so central to the conversation, which is a really good thing, and we're asking all the right questions. And Reed, my big takeaway from this COP is that it's a COP of contradictions. We're here in the Middle East with such a long history of oil and gas development, but yet we're talking about the global stock take for emissions in the future. And the mining industry actually may be one of those contradictions for people. They might be thinking, gosh, how is mining part of the solution? I thought mining was part of the problem. And it comes back to something I'm noticing in the current conversation around COP, Reed, which is that we try to bucket people, companies, and countries into either the heroes or the villains of the climate story. We like those easy distinctions. But what we're learning very much is that that's not how the world really works. Actually, instead of judging maybe at a meta level, we should be scrutinizing individual actions. And then we'll learn that actually everybody has something to contribute, but everybody is also probably not doing enough. And so what I'm pleased to see is that there is a real perspective being given to what it will take to grow the mineral supply required, much like what it will take to grow the stock of electricity grids, because there is no transition without a massive investment in electricity grids. Similarly, there's no transition without a huge investment in mining. And of course, the commitment we want to come with is to say we will produce these as responsibly as we possibly can, and we will learn from the mistakes of the past to do them better. And I think why that's important and encouraging for me is that part of the reason I feel we haven't made the kind of progress we should have made in global climate negotiations is that we haven't thought through enough of the building blocks of what it takes to make something happen. It's a bit like building your house and having a really nice outside and facade, but forgetting about the plumbing. That's going to get you into trouble. And the mineral supply, much like grids, are the kind of plumbing that make everything work inside the overall house we're trying to build here. And so it's a really good sign, but it's also complicated that mining is here because, as you can tell, critical minerals are starting to become a geopolitical issue. They're clearly so connected into concerns around sustainability. And of course, they're at the heart of the just transition discussion. But I really am so optimistic because what I'm seeing happen in the industry is that we can grow mineral supply while upholding the highest standards of responsibility. And climate and greenhouse gas emissions is a great example of that. We've committed to be net zero scope 1 and 2 by 2050 or sooner. We did that all the way back in 2021. We were the first group of companies in a hard to abate sector to do that. We're also taking really significant action on scope 3 emissions. The reason that's important is because when you take a mineral product, 75% to 95% of the total emissions associated with that product are often in scope 3. So it's not enough for us to sit back and say, well, we haven't emitted carbon in our operations when the atmosphere doesn't care whether the emissions came from us or from the steel mill. And so we have a responsibility to help our customers decarbonize as well.
You bring up an interesting point that I want to dive into briefly, which is there is a reality here that these supply chains and the development of new resource flows in order to effectively capacitize our renewable energy manufacturing targets are caught up in a little bit of this geopolitics competitiveness agenda that's emerging throughout the clean energy world, because this is a generational change in the global economy if we reach our net zero goals. How do we navigate those challenges between geopolitics, competitiveness, and sustainability, but also market creation in the COP process? Without, we don't want to get gummed up with worrying about, my slice of the pie versus everyone's pie, because that's going to hang up our ultimate goal, which is reaching that net zero target by 2050.
The thing about minerals that unites us all is that we all use them and we all have them. Everything we touch, see, smell, and taste actually comes from the ground. Either it's grown or it's mined. And so we all have a perspective on minerals that we can bring to bear to the COP process, which isn't the case for other things. Not all of us have oil and gas, even though all of us use oil and gas. Not all of us have chemicals, even though we all use chemicals. But minerals, we all have them and we use them. Because think about it, anywhere in the world, we have a stock of metals and minerals in the ground that we can extract and use for the stuff we need. But we also have a stock of things we've already mined that we can then reuse and recycle. And so I maybe naively so think that minerals should be the area of the greatest cooperation because they're actually very democratically spread. Now, of course, concentrations do exist in where they're extracted and where they're processed. And that's when geopolitics becomes complicated, because I think what the last few years have shown us is that dependency on any one country or supplier for things we absolutely need is a bad place for any country or region to find itself in. But here too, I'm seeing a lot of coordination happening around the world, things like the Mineral Security Partnership, led by the US and the UK, but involving 14 countries. But what I'm also encouraged by is that there is also coordination happening amongst the countries in the global south, particularly those that have vast quantities of metals and minerals who want to use it as an opportunity to develop their people. I haven't seen that level of coordination from the global south on another issue like I'm seeing on metals and minerals. And so it tells us that if we encourage that, if we support that, we have the opportunity of ensuring that this time, and that's important because in previous rounds of mining investment, we cannot say that countries in the global south have truly benefited, but this time, people can really make sure that that natural wealth that sits under the ground for so many parts of the world is actually converted into social and economic wealth. Because frankly, people in the parts of the world that I come from, in Africa and Asia, are saying to the West, hey, so you told us we can't extract our coal because it's going to make the problem of climate change worse, which it will. And now you're not really giving us the opportunity to use our copper or something else either because we're getting caught up in this geopolitics. No. You don't get to do that to us a second time.
And I think you point out one of the most important features of the energy transition that's emerging through our new dependencies on minerals. And it is the global south having a greater voice in this process than perhaps it ever has before. And in a world where we're seeing on any number of other fora this emerging global north and south divide, the fact that the global south has agency in this process and can play a critical role in how we shape our climate future is hugely positive. And so it's actually great to see, a refreshing take on kind of the positivity opportunity related to mineral supply chain, because so much of what we hear is about the competition and the geopolitics, when there actually is a path forward to engage this in a constructive manner.
Totally, Reid. Let me get a little bit personal here. I grew up in a family that was relatively poor. I say relatively poor because we had a roof over our heads, but we didn't know where our next meal was going to come from. And we were lucky that we had a roof over our heads, because when I look out onto the world, there are hundreds of millions, if not billions of people in the global south that don't even have that. And when I think about which industry or which opportunity in the next 30 years is going to lift people out of poverty and give them an opportunity for development, it's minerals. Because minerals are the growth industry for the future, and they are available in the global south. I'm not going to see a huge tech campus happening in the townships of South Africa anytime soon, but I absolutely can see huge mineral projects that will give the South African youth an opportunity for development. And that's what's so nice about this, is that there is an opportunity lying ahead of us that makes the world better and more sustainable because it helps decarbonize, but in doing so lifts people out of poverty. I can't think of another sector that can do that.
You're absolutely right. And once again, you make another great point that this touches not just on any number of other pieces of the COP agenda, but is directly related to this lives and livelihoods piece of the COP agenda that we've seen emerge just at this COP as part of the COP28 presidency. I think we'll end there, because I think we got to end on a positive note when it comes to minerals and mining. So we'll be doing a lot more of these live from COPs at the Global Decarbonization Accelerator Pavilion. So stay tuned for more. But until then, Ro, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Reid.